Mount Rainier is the most prominent peak in the Cascade Range, soaring to 14,410 feet, with ancient forests, alpine meadows, high-altitude lakes, and more glaciers than any other mountain in the lower 48. This active volcano is a tourist destination for nearly 2 million people every year. For Jason Williams, however, the 5-mile vertical hike through those forests and meadows up to the lakes is a commute to work. Williams is a scientist doing PhD research at Washington State University. He is studying nitrogen deposition in the high-elevation lakes of the Pacific Northwest.
Well, there's been a lot of research on the effects of nitrogen deposition on phytoplankton in the Rocky Mountains and other regions of the country, but here in the Northwest we don't know as much about how nitrogen deposition is affecting aquatic systems and phytoplankton specifically.
Nitrogen deposition is the nitrogen that falls from the atmosphere. It can come from rain, snow, hail, even gases and dust, and most of it is generated by man-made pollutants. Natural nitrogen is not the concern.
We need a buoy too.
Williams is chasing the bad forms called reactive nitrogen. He and his team have been working for 2 years collecting samples from lakes in the Cascades and Olympic mountain ranges. Those samples are painstakingly collected in the field for later testing in the lab.
So for this first one, do you still want me to run a little sample?
The data from those tests are of particular interest to the National Park Service, whose role it is to protect and conserve special areas like Mount Rainier for future generations.
The goal is to get out of this research what we call a critical load, which is the amount of nitrogen you can add to an ecosystem without having an adverse effect.
Williams and his team are testing nature's bellwethers, phytoplankton, a type of microscopic algae.
Phytoplankton are somewhat of a canary in the coal mine, where they're an early warning sign of nitrogen deposition effects.
Those effects can be far-reaching, not only altering the ecosystems here in the mountains, but also those downstream. And the sources of the problems can be equally far-reaching.
For example, in the Cascades, the nitrogen that gets deposited there might be coming from tailpipes of cars and trucks as driving up and down the I-5 interstate. It could be coming from industrial sources. Or some of it could even be transported from Asia across the Pacific Ocean.
This concern over unnatural nitrogen deposits is relatively new to the National Park Service. Studies have only begun in the last decade, but early results are causing alarm.
What humans have done is shift the global balance of the amount of reactive nitrogen to non-reactive nitrogen. They've really increased the amount of reactive nitrogen.
Establishing the critical load, how much nitrogen is too much, is the goal of Williams' research. That information will be used by the National Park Service and policymakers to determine if stricter pollution regulations are needed. These scientific intruders to the high alpine region of Mount Rainier may be a bother to some, but the work being done is important for the future of these delicate ecosystems, for humans downstream, for all creatures great and small.